All right. Here joined now by longtime head coach of the Dexter Tigers, Coach Peter Murray. Coach, thank you so much for joining us here. A little bit of a bittersweet interview for me personally, having, played under you at Dexter and, knowing you and knowing how much you love the game. But we understand you have an announcement and I guess to kind of get right into it, you have decided that after your long and impressive coaching career, now is the time to retire.
Yeah, there's never a good time. It's one of those things. I've been thinking about it really for the last 4 or 5 years, and we got in the middle of COVID, and it just kind of slowed the thought process down a little bit. Wanted to get us through that, and then on the backside of COVID, I'm just trying to not really pick a particular time, but this year I said it's a good round number. It's 30 years as the varsity coach, and it's one of those things where I don't want to hang on too long. And so, as I've told the people at the school, I said, we need somebody that's younger and has the enthusiasm and the energy to, take this program where it needs to go from here. So, happy with the run that I've had, and just felt like this was the right time.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit of bias coming from me on this end, but the Dexter head coaching job is this very special, position. From my memory, there's only been two varsity head coaches in the program's history, and you're a major part of that, obviously being one of the two. But when we get to the end, it's kind of fun to go back to the beginning. And I
Sure.
know you're an absolute historian of the game and conversations I've had with you over the years, but kind of getting into your journey, let's go back to the beginning a little bit here. We're not going to take too much time on it maybe, but what led you to Dexter? That maybe not everybody knows how you started this impressive career as a Dexter
Yeah.
boys basketball head coach.
Well, I mean, ironically, my very first coaching position I ever had in my life was at Dexter High School. I was there as a student teacher, and basically fell into a teaching job while I happened to be there as a student teacher. My last 9 weeks of student teaching, I was being paid as a first year teacher. So, and stayed there the rest of the year. Got asked to get involved in the basketball program there, and I did, and that was my very first job. That summer, that job dried up, and so I had to look for a job, and I was applying from one end of the state to the other. I interviewed in Rooster County. I interviewed down in York County, and Dexter was the first people to offer me a job. And so I took it, and I've been here ever since. Basketball wise, when I first came here, they were looking for a freshman basketball coach. And I did that for, I can't remember, 4 or 5 years. And then I became the JV coach. Then I was the athletic director for a little while. And then when the head coaching job became available, I was ready for that, and I wanted that. Yeah, since 1968, Ed Gursky and I have been the only two basketball coaches here at this school, and we overlapped each other by about 11 years. So I was an assistant to him, working under him for 11 years. So yeah, it's been a long time that I've been involved. I've been 30 years as the varsity coach, but I've really been over 40 overall involved in basketball in Dexter.
And not a lot of people across the state, maybe across the nation, can say that, which is truly impressive. You mentioned a man a minute ago that I'm not sure maybe enough people around the state and know his name, and Ed Gursky, the gymnasium at Dexter is named after him. And I know you were close with him. Obviously, you mentioned a moment ago you coached with him for a long period of time before you took over as a head varsity coach. And maybe, this is about you in general, but what did, learning from Ed, a legend in the state of Maine in terms of basketball, what did learning from him kind of mean to you and get you started in this basketball journey?
Well, I mean, I've been fortunate in my life to have some really great mentors. I grew up in East Millinocket, and so coming from a sports-oriented town, I had some great mentors there. I landed here in Dexter, and Lloyd Connors and Ed Gursky had been partnered together in coaching basketball in Dexter for quite a long time before I got here. So I kind of slid in there as that third guy. And so I had two great mentors, two great people that were so good to me. And Ed was, legendary to me. I mean, Skank and Dexter have a long history of rivalry. And I always saw Ed as the ultimate of villains throughout my playing career and whatnot. And then when I came over here and finally met him, I mean, he's a big teddy bear. You know, he was nothing like the perception I had for him. And it was such a great learning experience to watch him, to see how he did things. And, you know, just to take as much as what I could take from him, just, you know, be a sponge and just take as much knowledge as I could from him. So that was a special time for me. And I think it really helped give me a foundation for my varsity coaching career.
Definitely got you started on the right foot there, started off well. But now let's kind of bring it back now to more recent years. Started at the beginning, more recently, you and the Dexter program have had a ton of success. And obviously a large part of that is you, but it's the athletes as well. What is kind of, I know you mentioned in the beginning of the interview, COVID, and that was a difficult time, but overall it's been a 4 or 5 year run for Dexter that's been very competitive, has gone to a state championship, has really been involved in high quality and down to the very end of it, basketball. What has kind of this recent run meant to you in the grand scope of a long, illustrious career?
You know, I mean, I can go back to the very first year I coached, and I remember those kids and that team and us trying to accomplish things. And it really hasn't changed since that first year. The two questions I ask kids at the beginning of every season is, what are we going to be about? What's this team going to be about? And generally we always end up agreeing that we're about winning, and we want to win, and we're willing to do whatever that takes. And that means come to practice every day. That means practice hard every day, even if there's no guarantee that I'm going to get a chance to play in these games. I still want to be part of this. If you get that kind of buy-in from kids, the other question I ask them is, do you want to be coached? You know, do you want to be coached? Because coaching in and of itself is a critical business, and you've got to have a thick skin and be, you know, and I'm going to try every day to make you a better player. So, and that's not always going to be comfortable. So the idea is that if you're willing to answer yes to those two questions, we're going to be about winning, and I want you to coach me, then we got a pretty good formula for success. You know, something else about our program, we mentioned Ed and Lloyd. I mean, they're obviously a big part of it, but during my tenure as the varsity coach, Greg Crispell was the middle school coach here almost as long as I was the varsity coach. And that's unheard of in and of itself. That's a kind of a revolving door. And so I give him a lot of credit for our success. You know, it takes a lot of people to make this all work. I mean, I've had some great parents in the last 4 or 5 years, just absolutely off the charts parents. And you hear of all the negative going on with basketball from time to time. And a lot of it does involve overactive parents. In my case, it's been exactly the opposite. I mean, I've had the people that have been nothing but supportive of their sons and also of our program. So, you know, that we have a winning formula, you know, that kind of a thing. And I don't take that for granted, not even for 1 second. I love it every day that we have that.
Yeah, a great answer, and absolutely. Moving on now, have you had the opportunity, you know, in knowing that it's your final year and you're getting done now, to look at your career? I mean, over 300 wins, as you mentioned moments ago, coaching for over 30 years. Have you taken the time yet, or has it really sunk in yet, that what you've meant for not just Dexter, and you've meant a lot there, I can again attest to that. I was a student there and played under you, but also for the scope of Maine basketball, because we should mention you're also very involved in Maine high school basketball in general. Have you taken the opportunity yet to kind of realize and kind of think about your career in general and what this journey has been like?
Well, I mean, you're referencing the Maine Association of Basketball Coaches, of which I've been the president for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm also on the executive board of the National High School Basketball Coaches Association as well. But I take on those duties almost as a feeling of obligation to try to give something back, to try to leave the product as good as it was. You know, I've had a great experience with it. I mean, basketball has done so much for me and given me so much that I feel like I need to I need to do something to give back to it. And that's my way of doing that, is to serve the game by serving in those positions and representing basketball coaches, because that's what I am. It's hard to separate yourself from it. And no, I really haven't, to be quite honest with you. I haven't sat and looked back on it all and whatnot, but I'm sure I will at some point. Really the way I've approached this for 30 years is every year has been its own thing. I don't look at it as this year is going to build to the next. I mean, every year is its own entity, and it's almost like, there's been 30 individual years, not 30 combined years. I mean, I think if you look back on it, and, the trend that you see around the state is that, people like me that have stayed for a long period of time, that's probably going to be less likely to happen. There's only a few of us still left in our league, Coach Russell and Coach Harris at Central, and Lee, two of my good friends in coaching, but not many that probably will withstand that. And I'm not sure. I mean, I never thought I'd stay as long as I did, to be quite honest with you. And it just kind of happened. And now, we've kind of come to an end at this point.
Yeah. And a beautiful end, because, you've meant a lot to the game. I can say that right now. Like, your record and your accomplishments speak for themselves, and, it's an impressive career. And we've been very lucky I was very lucky to play under you, and the area has been very lucky to have you. But now that this chapter is closing, have you kind of thought about what is next? I mean, what is there going to be? Are you going to stay active in basketball? What does the next steps look like for Coach Murray?
Well, I mean, I think, what a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know is that, I mean, I've coached over 30 years of varsity soccer, and I'm in my 32nd or 33rd year of coaching varsity tennis right now. That goes with the 40 years of basketball. So I think really what's happened is I've just kind of worn down mentally. That's really been the most of it. I think physically I could still capable of doing it. But I just need to take time to catch my breath. And of course, my personal life has changed, my family, grandchildren, things like that. That evolution has occurred as well. Fortunately for me, I mean, we're a basketball family. We're a sports family. It's been season to season to season. That's how we do it. That's what the Murray family is all about. So I've had tremendous support that way. I am still going to remain as president for my term. Goes for another year at least. If the coaches felt like they wanted a non-active coach still leading their association, I wouldn't necessarily oppose continuing with that. Also continue with the national organization, which gets me closely connected to the MPA and things like that at that level. So I don't see myself like completely walking away and just being a shadow. I mean, I'll be around. People will be, still know that I'm out there, and I never say never. I mean, you give me 2-3 years off and I get refreshed and whatnot, and an opportunity presented itself, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't necessarily come back and take that. But right now, at this time, I think it's the right decision. I think I'm close to getting done teaching, so this seems like the logical time to get done with basketball as well.
And makes a lot of sense, and also a great teacher. Should point that out as well. And you do have a great support system. Again, having known you and your family, it's amazing to see not just how dedicated you are to the sports itself, but also the athletes that have walked through the door quite literally and with open arms. Your family has been fantastic every step of the way. And I know that is a major part of every coach's life, but athletes' lives as well. And your family has been, tremendous in that regard.
Well, and I count among, I've been extremely lucky that way. There's no doubt about it. I mean, my wife's from a athletic family, and she kind of knew what she was getting into, and she's been almost like an assistant coach to the program as well. And like you say, I mean, all the kids that have played for me over the years they've all been here at my house, and they've all spent time. We spent time together and whatnot. And some of those, people from the early days, I count among my best friends, my closest friends now. When I first showed up in Dexter, I mean, I wasn't that much older. I mean, Steve Bell, who's the principal of the school, was a sophomore in high school when I showed up here. And so, he's now the principal of the school. And so I, count him among one of my close friends. And Gary Williams, a legend in this town, is a basketball player, was a JV coach for me for 11 years. So, he's another one that was one of those on those teams in the 80s that was so good. But, so, it's always fun to see people and reminisce, when I run into people like you, and having Jason Campbell on my bench for the last couple of years, and former players and whatnot, staying close. I mean, Trevor Fogarty, a great player back in his time. He's my next door neighbor now these days. So I've stayed connected with these people as much as I can. Run into them at basketball environments, either at the tournament or in our gym, and hope that continues because I really enjoy that.
Yeah, and I hope that it continues as well, having been one of the people that gets to run into you from time to time. All right, so wrapping it up here, I'm gonna probably ask the hardest question that you can ask a coach, especially one that's had the career you've had. But what has the game of basketball, and maybe specifically coaching it, what has it meant to you if you were to try and summarize it?
Well, to me, coaching of any sport, it's all about the people that I've met along the way. So, I mean, I have, hundreds of former players that are, just such awesome people, and watching them grow up and then move on with their lives, and many of whom now have families of their own. I've had the opportunity to coach a couple sons of former players. So it's I've been through that cycle. The coaches that I've met, my friends in coaching, I mean, there's some of the people that I'm the closest to. We have a shared experience, and so we have a chance to talk with each other. And I mean, I have friends in coaching from one end of the state to the other at this point, and I count that as one of the greatest gifts that I've been given from basketball, is just the relationships I've had with people. I mean, going to the Bang Auditorium, and it starts from walking, or the Cross Center now, but walking through the back door, and the ladies at the table that are checking teams in. I mean, these people that you see once a year, and you come out onto the floor, and a lot of times it's the same people that are leading you in some way or another, telling you where to go or what to do and whatnot. And those are all people that I've met through basketball. And if I wasn't coaching basketball, I would never have met most of these people. And so that's probably the most important thing to me. I know that, the modern social media and people in general, they get fixated on wins and losses and things like that, but I've never really looked at it that way. That really doesn't mean all that much to me, quite frankly. It's the relationships I have with former players and my coaching brethren that really means the most to me.
And I'm sure, again, I can attest, you've meant a lot to all of those people, the connections along the way. And to give you your flowers, so to speak, you have meant, and I said it before, but I'll say it again, you have meant so much to not just Dexter and the program, but Maine High School basketball. You could argue the story of Maine High School basketball over these last 30 years. It can't be told without Coach Murray at Dexter. You're part of a rare breed. Not many of you left, as you mentioned, and an incredible career, and one that we've all been lucky enough to watch alongside you.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot coming from you, and I have a lot of respect for you and what you've done since you've left school. And glad to see you sticking involved with basketball and whatnot. But believe me when I say that I've gotten so much more out of it than anyone else that I just cannot say enough how good basketball has been to me over my career.
And Coach, maybe before we go, I can get you to agree to get on a game with us next year, Eastern Maine Sports Media. You're going to have some more time on your hands, so maybe we can get you up in the booth with us and you can teach me a thing or two about the game of basketball.
Long as it's not a Dexter game.
All right, done. Deal is done. Thank you so much, Coach. Again, retiring now after 300 wins, 30 years of coaching. Won't be one like you again. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for what you've given to the game of basketball.
No, thank you very much, Zach. I appreciate it.